The 1960s didn't just give us muscle cars, it gave us thunder wrapped in chrome, speed stitched into steel. Each car wasn't merely built, it was summoned, forged by grease-stained hands and Detroit dreams. They weren't made to idle. They were made to roar, to race, to remind the world what American velocity really feels like. One 1969 Chevrolet Camaro, ZL1. It didn't whisper onto the asphalt, it detonated. The 1969 Camaro ZL1 wasn't just the fastest Camaro of its decade, it was a missile with a license plate. Under the cowl induction hood breathed a hand-assembled 427 cubic inch big block V8. But not just any 427. This was the all-aluminum ZL1, a racing engine barely tamed for the street, generating a terrifying 430 horses on paper, and closer to 500 in reality. There was no insulation, no luxuries, no distractions, only raw steel and raw power. A car that rumbled like war drums at idle and screamed like an eagle on the hunt, above 6,000 RPM. It weighed less than most muscle thanks to that aluminum block, and it moved with a violence that tested rear tires and driver nerves. Chevy only built 69 of them, not because demand was low, but because few were brave enough to tame it. This wasn't transportation, it was controlled detonation. Two 1966 Shelby Cobra 427 Super Snake. There's fast. Then there's Carroll Shelby's idea of fast. The 1966 Shelby Cobra Super Snake was his final defiant laugh at physics. Start with the already brutal 427 Cobra, a race car with a license plate. Then bolt on twin Paxton superchargers, feed it aviation fuel, and you get something unholy. 800 horsepower caged in a featherweight aluminum body. This wasn't a car, it was an outlaw with tires. 0 to 60 in just over 3 seconds while in the 60s. It was banned from racing for being too dangerous, and the road barely survived it. The body was narrow, twitchy, alive under your fingers. At 150 miles per hour, the wind didn't scream, it vanished. Only two were built. One flew off a cliff. The other still rumbles like thunder echoing across time. When Shelby named it the Super Snake, he wasn't exaggerating. He was warning you. Third, 1969 Dodge Charger Daytona. It didn't slip through the air, it sliced it. The 1969 Charger Daytona was built for NASCAR bloodsport. Not beauty, not comfort, just speed. It wore a nose cone sharp enough to wound and a rear wing tall enough to insult gravity. Under its sloped hood, the legendary 426 Hemi. 425 horsepower, 490 pound-feet of torque, and a 0 to 60 time that mocked everything in its class. This was the first car in NASCAR history to break 200 miles per hour. It wasn't just fast, it redefined fast. The Daytona didn't care if it looked ridiculous. That wing? Functional. That nose? Tested in wind tunnels when most brands were still guessing with tape measures. It only existed because Dodge wanted to dominate. And dominate it did, until NASCAR changed the rules to stop it. Only 503 were built to satisfy homologation laws, and everyone is a rolling defiance of the word impossible. Fourth, 1969 Ford Mustang Boss 429. It didn't growl, it thundered. The 1969 Boss 429 wasn't designed to be a street car. It was a loophole, a legal technicality. Ford needed to race a monster engine in NASCAR, the 429 cubic inch Hemi-headed V8. And the only way to homologate it was to shove it into the Mustang. But the engine was too wide, so Ford sent unfinished Mustangs to Carcraft, where engineers cut, welded, and re-engineered the front end to make it fit. What emerged wasn't just a car, it was a Frankenstein's monster of muscle, rated at 375 horsepower, but everyone knew better. It was closer to 500. The Boss 429 was heavy, temperamental, and overbuilt. And it didn't care. This car wasn't made for comfort or mass appeal, it was made to win. On the street, it rumbled like restrained fury. On the track, it simply erased the competition. 1968 Plymouth Roadrunner HEMI. It didn't come with frills, it came with fists. The 1968 Plymouth Roadrunner HEMI was Detroit's middle finger to rising prices and softening muscle. No leather, no power windows, no chrome excess. Just steel, rubber, and a 426 Hemi under the hood. A block of rage tuned for drag strips. It hit 0 to 60 in 5.3 seconds, but it wasn't built for numbers. It was built for noise, torque, and brutality. You could hear it coming a mile away in Sistro, a mechanical growl rising into a full scream. The interior was Spartan, but the soul was loud. Every curve of the fender looked like it was pressing forward, hungry, and it was cheap, deliberately. A street weapon priced for the working man. The Roadrunner wasn't elegant. It was efficient, explosive, and unforgettable. 1967 Chevrolet Corvette Stingray 427 L88. This wasn't just a Corvette. This was a secret weapon wrapped in fiberglass. The 1967 L88. Stingray didn't come advertised. Chevrolet didn't want regular buyers behind the wheel, because inside beat a 427 cubic inch V8 tuned for race fuel, not pump gas. Officially rated at 430 horsepower. Unofficially, try 550, maybe more. It came without a radio, without air conditioning, without compromise. Only 20 were made. 20. Because this wasn't built for streets. It was built for speed, pure, unfiltered, and raw. The L88 didn't whisper its intent. It howled it. From idle to redline, it sounded like it was trying to break free from its own chassis. It could hit 170 miles per hour without hesitation. And if you didn't know how to handle it, it would bite back. Hard. This was not a Corvette for the collector. This was a Corvette for the gladiator. 7th 1964 Pontiac GTO Tri-Power. They called it the GOAT. But the 1964 Pontiac GTO was no beast of burden. It was a wolf in a 3-carburetor suit. The Tri-Power setup, 3 2-barrel carbs feeding a 389 cubic inch V8, made it growl through the streets of America with a new kind of swagger. 325 horsepower was the official rating, but the soul of the car was heavier than specs. Pontiac didn't wait for permission. They created the GTO by bending rules and slipping it into the Tempest lineup like contraband. And when that ignition turned and the pipes belched fury, the muscle car era truly began. This was the first shot fired. The GTO wasn't just fast, it was a revolution on wheels. It didn't ask for a place in history, it burned rubber across it. 1966, Oldsmobile 442 W30. It didn't scream for attention, it roared past it. The 1966 442 W30 wasn't a street racer's fantasy. It was their nightmare. 442 stood for 4-barrel carburetor, 4-speed manual, dual exhaust. But the W30 package was where the magic lay. Forced air induction, heavy-duty camshaft, and a fine-tuned 400 cubic inch V8 ready to embarrass anything beside it. Its cold air scoops fed the beast through the headlights. A design born from pure defiance. This was Oldsmobile flexing its engineering muscle. It looked restrained. But behind the conservative trim lived brutality in disguise. Drag strips learned to fear it. This wasn't just a car for Saturday night sprints. It was a factory-built warrior. No flashy spoilers, no decals, just torque, teeth, and thunder. 9th 1965, Chevrolet Chevelle Malibu SS 396Z16. This was the storm before the flood. The 1965 Chevelle Malibu SS 396Z16. The quiet giant of mid-60s performance. Only 201 were made. They each carried a 396 cubic inch big block V8 that punched out 375 horsepower and low 14-second quarter miles. It was clean, stylish, civil, until the pedal hit the floor. Then the chassis twisted, the rear tires shrieked, and the exhaust roared like an unleashed lion. The Z16 was Chevrolet's quiet threat, a preview of the Chevelle's monstrous future. Inside, it was luxury. Outside, it was subtle. But under that hood, fire and fury. It didn't wear its power, it kept it hidden, waiting for the moment to strike. And when it did, the world took notice. 1969, AMC AMX 390 Go package. AMC didn't have the size, but it had the nerve. The 1969 AMX 390 wasn't born from muscle tradition. It was born to challenge it. Shorter than most, tighter than all. This two-seater coupe packed a 390 cubic inch V8 that clawed out 325 horsepower, with the Go package pushing it to track-ready specs. It wasn't loud in appearance, but on the road, it was impossible to ignore. Lightweight, rigid, and brutally quick. It was a scalpel among hammers. 0 to 60 in under 6 seconds, quarter mile in 14 flat. All from a brand that most underestimated. The AMX didn't try to be a copy of the Big Three, it carved its own legend, with a snarl and a swing. 1967 Plymouth GTX 426 Hemi. It was called the gentleman's muscle car, but make no mistake, it was a street assassin dressed in a three-piece suit. The 1967 Plymouth GTX came with all the polish, chrome-trimmed elegance, bucket seats, and refined lines. But lurking beneath that glossy calm was Detroit's most violent heartbeat, the 426 Hemi. Dual 4-barrel carburetors, solid lifters, 425 horsepower. This wasn't for the faint of foot. The Hemi didn't deliver its power smoothly. It hurled it forward in violent surges. From idle, the car trembled like a coiled spring, and once launched, it devoured quarter miles in the low 13s. But what made the GTX truly lethal was its balance. It was civil until it wasn't, polite until provoked. One moment it was cruising through suburbia like royalty. The next, it was redlining through the far side of sanity. The GTX 426 Hemi was proof that you could wear a tie and still throw punches. 12th, 1969. Pontiac Firebird Trans Am Ram Air 4. It didn't get the spotlight. It took it by force. The 1969 Pontiac Firebird Trans Am Ram Air 4 was born in the shadows of the GTO and Camaro. But under its conservative white paint and blue stripes lived something ruthless. The Ram Air 4 engine was Pontiac's secret weapon. A high-compression, aggressive-cammed, 400 cubic inch V8 that screamed past 6,000 RPM and punished pavement with 370 horsepower. But it wasn't just about straight-line rage. The Trans Am came with tuned suspension, quick ratio steering, and a low stance that dared corners to try and bite. Only 55 were ever built with the Ram Air 4. It was rare even then, mythic now. The car's name came from the Trans-American Racing Series. But it wasn't just a name, it was a mission statement. This wasn't just a Firebird, it was the one that breathed fire and left rubber trails across history. 13. 1965. Buick Skylark Grand Sport. Don't let the polished trim fool you. The 1965 Buick Skylark Grand Sport was the quiet cousin at the family barbecue, until the gloves came off. Buick jammed a 401 cubic inch nailhead V8 under the hood and lied on the paperwork. They called it 400 to sneak it past GM's internal rules that banned mid-size cars from having anything over that limit. That engine produced 325 horsepower and a flood of torque that shoved the car into the fast lane with authority. The Grand Sport wasn't a rebel, it was an enforcer, a straight-line brute in luxury clothing. It didn't come with the shout of a GTO or the flash of a Mustang, but when the light turned green it could outrun both. And it did it with quiet confidence. This wasn't about drama, it was about dominance delivered with a grin and a fist in a velvet glove. 1964. Ford Fairlane Thunderbolt built in secrecy. Unleashed in fury. The 1964 Ford Fairlane Thunderbolt was never meant for the masses. It was Ford's dragstrip assassin, born to do one thing: destroy the quarter mile. Only 100 were made, each stripped of comfort and crammed with violence. At its heart was a 427 cubic inch V8 with dual 4 barrels, conservatively rated at 425 horsepower. But that was a lie. The Thunderbolt could run the quarter mile in under 11 seconds with slicks. That's supercar territory now, even today. It had fiberglass fenders, aluminum bumpers, and plexiglass windows. Why? Because weight was the enemy, and speed was God. There was no radio, no heater, no distractions, just fury in gear form. When it launched, the front end lifted off the ground. It didn't accelerate. It lunged like it had something to prove. This wasn't a car you drove, it was a car you survived. 15. 1969 Mercury Cyclone spoiler, 428 Cobra jet. It was a muscle car with a mission: to cheat the wind. The 1969 Mercury Cyclone Spoiler 2 wasn't just designed for speed. It was engineered for aerodynamics, crafted in secret by Mercury's racing division to dominate the NASCAR tracks. Its elongated front nose and flush-mounted grille made it slice through the air like a javelin. Under the hood? A 428 Cobra Jet V8 with 335 horsepower and a torque curve as steep as a cliff. The engine was built for raw, relentless force, and the car's shape helped it stay planted while others lifted at high speeds. But despite its name, the Spoiler 2 wasn't built to follow. It was designed to lead, lap after lap, road after road. Just 519 were made to satisfy NASCAR's homologation rules. Each one looked like it was moving even when parked. It wasn't loud in the showroom, but on the speedway, it howled like justice. 1663 Ford Galaxy 500 XLR, code 427. This wasn't built for style points. It was a rolling thunderclap aimed at drag strips and wide-open highways. The 1963 Ford Galaxy 500 XLR code looked dignified. Chrome trim, full-size frame, plush interior, but beneath that civility roared a monster, the R code 427 dual quad V8. Rated at 425 horsepower, it wasn't just powerful, it was unpredictable. The throttle didn't ease you in, it launched you. The clutch took a real foot. The shifter demanded respect. This was a full-size car that ran 0 to 60 in under 6 seconds. In 1963, its mission? Dominate superstock drag classes and strike fear into rival brands. It had stiff suspension, free-breathing manifolds, and a deep, brutal exhaust tone that sounded more like an air raid than a car. When this Galaxy moved, it didn't roll, it surged. This was the king of straight lines wearing a crown of steel and velocity. 17. 1968 Dodge Coronet RET 426 Himai. It didn't boast, it barked. The 1968 Coronet RT was Dodge's way of saying, "We're not here to play." This was a full-bodied bruiser with an attitude problem. It came with a choice, and the bravest picked the 426 Hemi. 2 4-barrel carbs, 425 horsepower, and a thunderous growl that made the ground shiver. The Coronet wasn't small or sleek, but it had muscle. Thick, unyielding, unapologetic muscle. Its squared-off body gave it the look of a battering ram, and when you floored it, that's exactly how it behaved. Inside, it was surprisingly plush. But who noticed when your ears were ringing from the exhaust note and your spine was being shoved into the seatback? The RT stood for road track, and it delivered both, with a heavy foot and a clenched jaw. This wasn't finesse. It was force, 4 wheels at a time. 1869. AMC Javelin SST 390. Go Package AMC wasn't supposed to make cars like this. But in 1969, they did. The Javelin SST with the 390 Go Package was AMC's answer to the pony car war. And it didn't whisper, it roared. 390 cubic inches, 315 horsepower, 4-speed manual, dual exhaust, ram air induction. It was leaner than a Mustang, more aggressive than a Camaro, and it held corners like it meant it. Its fastback profile sliced the air, and the suspension felt tight, ready to spring forward like a coiled predator. This wasn't just about speed in a straight line. It was about grip, balance, defiance. AMC didn't have the marketing budgets, but they had the guts. And the Javelin SST proved it, every time it beat a Big 3 rival off the line. The underdog, the outsider, and for those who knew, the one that never backed down. 1962, Dodge Dart 413 Max Wedge. It sounded like it came from another planet. The 1962 Dodge Dart wasn't about curves or charisma. It was about violence, mechanical, methodical, and unrelenting. And the 413 Max Wedge engine was the heart of that savagery. High compression, dual carburetors, ram-inducted intake manifold that looked like alien tech. 425 horsepower designed to chew through the quarter mile and leave nothing standing. This wasn't a street car, you found that it was a dragster with license plates. The Dart wasn't pretty, it wasn't charming. But when it launched, the front wheels lifted, the sky tilted, and the earth shook. The Max Wedge didn't want to be driven, it wanted to be unleashed. And when it screamed down the strip, even silence stayed behind. It was the kind of car that made your pulse race before the tires even spun. A factory freak. Born to run. Bred to dominate. 20th, 1969, Chevrolet Nova SS396 L78. It was small, but it was no lightweight. The 1969 Chevrolet Nova SS with the L78 396 V8 was the neighborhood kid who could throw a knockout punch. 396 cubic inches, 375 horsepower, in a body that barely broke 3,300 pounds. That kind of power-to-weight ratio didn't just make it fast, it made it ferocious. The Nova wasn't flashy. No wings, no stripes, no bravado. But under that steel hood sat a motor tuned for combat. Forged internals, solid lifters, high revving rage. Quarter miles disappeared in the low 13s, and when it hooked up, it felt like being launched by a slingshot tied to the devil's wrist. It didn't come to impress. It came to intimidate. The Nova L78 was the sleeper hit of the street scene. Fast, furious, and feared. It was the last word in a loud argument, and it always came in rubber and smoke. They weren't just machines, they were declarations of speed, pride, and rebellion. Forged in steel, powered by fury, remembered in smoke. The 1960s gave us legends on four wheels. Some loud, some forgotten, all unstoppable. And even now, decades later, they're still racing through our veins.